To pull off the door trim, there are 4 pieces that you need to unclip initially. There's the one on the end here, there's one inside there, this one here, which is that piece there, and this one here as well. And they're actually all pretty simple to remove. They just unclip off just with a tool, something like that. I'll just pop straight out. There's just a couple of clips there. This one in the middle here, you can open that up like that, and then sort of get a tool in there like that. And that just pops straight out. The 2 clips are at the front there, so if you lever it at the front like that, and then it'll pop out. There's a little clip at the back there which goes in a slot at the back. This one at the front here, just going to get underneath it like that and just gently lever that up. That just levers up. And then there's a little funny hook thing that just holds onto it at the bottom. That thing there. So you would just pull it out and then just lever that free. And the one at the front, just get it on the inside. And that'll just pop straight out. There are a number of clips that just push straight into these spots here, so they just pull straight out. Now once you've done that, you've got access to the 4 screws that you need to remove. There's one there, there, inside there, and there's one at the back there. And once you remove those, then the door will come free. It's sitting on a bunch of hooks, so it's not going to fall off or anything. So I'll remove those 4 screws and then we'll pull the door off. I've removed those 4 screws, and now what I'm going to do is lift it up at the handle here, have something underneath that you can sit it on, because what you're going to have to do is disconnect the plugs at the front here, or the plug for all these controls in the inside, prior to moving the trim away. On the inside of the door panel, before we can move the trim away, there's the Bowden cable, which is for the door handle, as well as a single plug which goes to the door control unit. Even though there's all the wiring and everything on the inside here, you don't have to remove any of that. You can just disconnect this one plug and that controls everything there. So it's just a push the button, lift the handle, and that'll just pop straight out. And then to remove the Bowden cable, this thing slides rearwards, so you just need to move these clips out of the way at the back. That slides rearwards like that, and once that slides rearwards you can then rotate that around like that, and then that just pops straight out, and now you can pull the entire trim away. So once the trim panel is off, on the inside here, things that you need to do to actually get rid or to remove the subframe, I'm going to just push these rubber plugs in, the ceiling plugs. This one's to the Bowden cable, we're going to push that through. I'm going to disconnect this plug off this sensor here. Basically you have to pull the little tab down, and then you can push to rotate that around. So actually remove this, they can stay there if you like, but if you actually want to remove that, it actually rotates. So you lift up that tab there, and then you rotate it around and that'll just pop straight out. Got the plug for that sensor there, so you can just push that through. All of these little green things, they're little holders of the wiring harness behind, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a screwdriver and just gently push all those in so they're free on the other side. Other things I'm going to do, I can press that in, disconnect the subwoofer. To disconnect the wiring for the mid-range speaker here, I'm going to pull off that speaker, and there's a plug-in behind here which I can disconnect. Other things, to remove these plugs here, I can just pull those out like that. Then I can push in the tab, and then that plug will just come straight out. Let's put one up first. And we also need to remove the door control here. So what I'm going to do is I push that down, that unclips at the back here, and then that just rotates out. Now keep that aside, because what I'm going to do later on is when I remove this, I'm actually going to connect that back again so I can make the door move up and down, etc. The plug for this one here, that's for the mirror, which actually goes up through the inside into the mirror. You can just push that through. That'll get fit out later on. And this one as well. Actually, we won't do that just yet. We'll do that after I actually disconnect the airbag. To disconnect the airbag, I'm going to there's a little tab at the end here. Make sure the battery is disconnected, which is at the moment. And then I'm going to pop that out. That little orange thing will pop out, and then that'll just pull straight off. In addition to that, I've got the ground connection there, as well as those 4 connections, and I'm going to pull those off. When you're removing the airbag, remove the 3 here first. There's a stud that this will actually sit on. Remove the 2 ones on the outside and leave this one on, and then, because the centre of gravity of this is about the middle here, and then what you can do is pull that one off, and then that'll just pop off nicely so it doesn't sort of flop to one side. To disconnect the mid-range speaker, 3 screws, pull it off, and there's a simple plug connection on the other side. You can pop that out. This green one here is the same as the others, but you actually have to disconnect that from the other side. So we will disconnect once I actually pull the panel off, so that can come free, and then we can push that one all the way through. On the door subframe, there are a number of these rubber connections here. That's what the door trim panel, there's a hook that slots down over each of those, and they're all over the place. They've got a rubber piece that just pulls through like that, so it looks like that it folds over, and then that little rubber piece goes through the slot. All of these seem to be in pretty good condition, but on the other side, when I pulled that apart, this had actually been trashed on one of them, so I had to glue it back on there again. Something that I'm going to do when I put these back on is actually put some graphite on these so it actually slides down, because it was clear that the hook, when it came over the top of it, just put on the middle of it and just pretty much destroyed the thing on the way down. Just as something to be aware of. To actually get the panel off now, there's one 10mm nut here. On the other side, strangely, it was actually an expansion rivet like this, but on the driver's side, it's actually a 10mm nut or a 6mm nut. All we're going to do is remove all of these. They're simple, just grab some pliers and just pull those out, and they'll all pop out, and then you can peel the whole thing off. The expansion rivets on the door subframe look like this. I think you can either just grab hold of this with a pair of pliers and just pull it straight out, but I actually found that damaged the ends of it here, because you have to put quite a bit of force on it. So I just made up a little tool. This thing here, it's just a piece of 3/4mm steel, just from an old shed, that I have just put it's a 2.5mm gap in there, and that'll just slot nicely into the end there, which will enable you to push and pull those out really easily without doing any damage. So I've removed all of those expansion rivets. I've got all of these plugs pushed through here, and so what I'm going to do is pull it off. There's a seal that runs around the entire outside of it. It'll be sort of half stuck to it. It'll peel off quite easily, but it's not just going to fall off straight away. And then as I pull this off, I'm going to go down and I'm going to disconnect this one here, which will then allow that to push through. And then I'm going to pull the whole thing off whilst I guide all these things through the holes. On the other side here, I can't really show you, but there is a clip which sort of sits like that, and one of the lines from the Bowden cable on the window regulator is clipped onto that, so you need to disconnect that as well. And then that'll actually allow you to pull it away, from this a little bit more easily. And then in addition, and I'll show you once I actually disconnect it, there are two plugs, or the harness is actually connected on two black plugs. It's a bit hard to show you at the moment, so you just get a screwdriver and just lever those off. And now, once they're all disconnected, I can pull that Bowden cable through, pull that one through, pull all of those through, and then the one at the front, and that is your subframe with that main large speaker attached. When you are removing the subframe, a couple of things that helps you out. First thing is there's two knobs at the bottom here which hook over the bottom here, which allow the subframe to just sit there and sort of hang a little bit whilst you disconnect everything, so it doesn't fall away the moment you pull all the way the expansion rivets away, which is really, really nice. The things that you need to disconnect when you actually lean that forward, there's the hook on the back here. That one there is going to be hooked around the Bowden cable for the regulator, so disconnect. That's actually quite tight, so that'll take a bit of working out. The two clips for the wiring harness there and they're on a couple of knobs here, so just get a little screwdriver and just feed it in those and just work those off nice and gently. All of these other green clips should be disconnected, the ones that plug in from the rear side, because you can just squeeze those clips together and push those out. The only one that's a bit of a problem child is this one here, which connects to the mid-range speaker. That's going to be pushed from the front, so you always have to reach your hand in and squeeze that. That's actually in a bit of a difficult position. You might have to get a screwdriver in there to work that apart so you can get that off. Now, other than that, all these plugs here should be disconnected. Obviously the airbag would be disconnected as well. I'm just going to push those in from the outside as well as the Bowden cable, and then the subframe can come clear. When you install, obviously it's going to be the reverse of that. Hook the subframe up there, click everything in from the rearward, make sure we get the Bowden cable so that doesn't rattle, as well as all these clips. Push everything through. When you're installing, I've found that these plugs go through fairly simply. They're quite grippy rubber, so if you want to help yourself out, put some graphite powder on those, just smear around it and they'll go in a lot more easily. This one here is actually quite difficult to push through because it's quite large and stiff, so definitely I would advise getting some graphite powder to ease that on the way through, so it's nice and snugly fit correctly prior to actually putting the subframe up there in its position and putting all the expansion rivets in. Once I get the subframe off, if I'm going to do work to the motor, or sorry, to the window, then I will need to probably raise and lower it a few times to get it to different positions. So I'll need to put power on the car, so then before I do that I'm going to put the airbag back on, connect those up. I'm going to connect all of the bits to the door control unit, and then I'll just prop up the liner, the trim that was on the inside that has all the controls for the windows and for your seats, etc. You put that on, connect up that cable that we attached or disconnected before that attached into here, and then you can move it up and down quite happily. But obviously, like I said before, you don't want to put power on to the car whilst ever you have the airbag disconnected, just so you don't get any airbag lights, etc. Prior to raising the window to remove it, you need to remove the outer seal, and the way that is done, just grab hold of the rearward portion and just wiggle it, and it's just going to slide off the metal flange underneath it, just nice and gently so you don't bend it. And then I'm going to pull it up along this edge, but then at the front here it actually sits underneath this triangle corner, so you just have to slide rearwards. And off it comes. And with that airbag in place, everything, all the electrics connected down here, connect the battery, and then you can put the key in the ignition and motor that window up. To actually remove the window, it's a bit hard to see, but the connection points actually need to be further down here, because otherwise you can't get it clear of these spots here. So if you motor it from the uppermost position to about 10 centimetres lower, and then you're going to be able to get it into a position to remove it. So just show you what's actually going on with the regulator and all these connection points. This is the parts from the other side from the regulator that I've pulled to bits. That big funny looking screw there with all the sort of cog teeth around the outside of it sits on the other side of each one of those. And so basically it sits like that there and screws in the gap. There's a plastic piece there. This is the slider that goes up and down the rails. You can see that portion there. The window itself actually sits in that gap in there, and that big screw tightens on top of that to hold it in place. Now when it's sitting there like this, when you look at that side, which I can see through there, through that gap, there's a T25 Torx fitting, and from this side it's a left-hand thread. So to loosen it, you would actually turn it clockwise. Okay, I suggest that you don't use that side. There's only 6 Newton meters of torque on these. However, because this thing on the other side is so large, there's actually quite a bit of force that needs to go on that screw to unscrew it, and they would strip very, very easily. There was, until when I first started, I tried to do it with that on the other side and I could feel a thing giving, so I went to the other side and found out what sort of fitting was on there, and there's actually a 5mm hex fitting which goes in there. Room to get a bit on the inside, and I just used that with a 10mm spanner on this particular bit, and that just popped out really, really easily, just putting that in there. In addition, what the actual Porsche manual talks about is a special tool, because to actually tighten these and put everything in place, you actually need the whole door back together again. You're going to leave that seal, that outside seal, and then this thing, this is a tool that I've actually made, and this thing actually slots straight onto that cog there. Let me just pull that off and I'll show you how that works. So if that's sitting there like that, this is going to come down from the outside of the window, and all it is, it's just a tool with a slot in there that's 13mm wide, and that slots nicely into the little gap around the outside of it. This is all one piece, it's all sort of locked together. And then I've got a 3mm rivet which is just put in there, so that's what actually goes on inside to actually turn it. So that would actually, so you have to do that with the window all the way up. This is 25 centimetres long, which should be plenty long enough to actually loosen those when you are just to adjust the height and the position of the window. But to actually get the actual window out, you need to lower it a little bit so it gets clear of all the different mechanism and everything, and then you can loosen it either by using this tool if you want, or I actually use that hex fitting, that 5mm hex is actually a lot easier, and then you have to completely remove this out of this mechanism. So the window that can be opened, and then the windows can actually pop out. If you remove this, that's obviously still there in place, so it's not going to drop the window into the bottom of the frame. It'll just quite happily sit there, and then you can manoeuvre it out of the top. Okay, they were on really tightly, much tighter on the other side. You would strip that Torx in a heartbeat trying to use that, so I would definitely suggest using that 5mm hex on the inside, unless you actually had a really sturdy tool that you've made yourself. Mate, that would just, I don't think it would actually take that off, so I guess that's my suggestion there. And then once that's clear, you can now just pull that window straight out. And to remove the regulator, I've disconnected the plug. It's just a press on the inside and then pull that off. I'm going to loosen the two at the bottom here. I don't need to remove those because they're in slots, so I'll just pull straight out. And the others three, the bottom and the two at the top, I'll just remove those. And there's your window regulator. Removing the motor, there are 3 screws on the inside here, and that doesn't unravel any of the cables or anything like that, and then you can just pull the motor off on the other side if that needs to be replaced. Installation is obviously just the reverse of that, which is relatively simple. If you need to remove the mirror, or if you remove the plug here, there's just a single bolt on the inside here that just unscrews, and you have access without actually removing the subframe. However, this cord here, this electrical connection that goes to the door control unit, needs to be removed, and then that gets fed all the way up inside here. So you would need to get access to that. And the easiest way to do that is definitely by getting your hands up here without the subframe in place. And then once you feed that out, that whole cord comes out with the mirror itself. So this is the window regulator when it's out. Motor is just here, 3 screws. If you remove those, that'll just pop straight out. There's the motor there and the little transmission that makes that move at the correct pace. And in behind there is just where the cables all connect. And now you can see that if I move up and down, that should just move nice and freely. So when the window is inside the car, when you're removing it, when you pull out these things, this is the outside here and the inside looking down. That obviously screws in there. You get to remove both of those. Then those plastic things just come free, same on the other side. When you are installing, they obviously go in. And what you can do, because you can actually sort of reach underneath these quite easily when this is put in the car, and tighten that quite easily to the point where they can't be moved, or where the window can't move. But then, this is the tool that we were looking at before, and so what it's going to do is, with that seal removed, the window all the way up and adjusted to the correct position, you can slot that in there, and then you can loosen it, move it to the correct position, okay, and then tighten it like that, and then it's going to be in the correct position and locked in place. So we install the window. We're just going to gently feed it through. That front seal is removed, or the outer seal. I'm going to put it into the guide at the front. And then I'm going to slide it down and allow it to go into those 2 plastic pieces on the regulator. It's really important that when you are installing this, you actually have the window regulator attachment pieces about in this position here, above this brace piece, and not too high, so you can actually get in behind here. And now hand fit the two big screws. So prior to putting on the subframe, I'm going to get some graphite and put it around each of the plugs there. Also just going to get a little bit of grease and put it on the spot here where it's going to clip on the rear side of the subframe, because I find that is really quite difficult to put on, and with a bit of grease it just helps out. And also, I'm not sure if you can notice there, but certainly on the other side there was some damage to the outer cover of that, so just a little bit of grease will hopefully stop that from happening again in the future. Now with the subframe, you can sit it on those hooks at the bottom, and then we can start to feed everything through. Probably the easiest thing to do to start off with, just to hold it in place, is to feed this big plug through, and then it'll just sit there quite happily whilst you do everything else. Got all those plugs through. Now you can go to the back side of it and start plugging in those green clips. And once you've got all those in place, then the last one is that Bowden cable for the window regulator. Clip that on, and then I can set everything up in place and put all those rivets on. The mid-range speaker can go in. You plug the other speaker connection in. We can connect the couple of connections for the door control unit. And then that just slides down in there and clips in. Right, and then we're going to connect the airbag. Newton meters or 7.5 foot-pounds. When installing the trim, I would suggest putting just some graphite on each of these tabs. It's going to hook over each of these. It'll make it a bit easier to slide down. Also on the two bottom ones, there are hooks that'll actually sit on those two bottom hooks or lugs, so you can actually just sit it on it and then hook everything up. To connect the Bowden cable, you probably will need to do that first and take it off those hooks. But then once that's connected, you can just sit it on those two hooks. It'll sit there okay, and now you can connect everything. So it's really only two connections, the connection to the electrical unit as well as the Bowden cable. Make sure you put that clip in at the back. And now we're going to lift it up, push it in, and then gently lower it down onto each of those 8 hooks. With that graphite on there, that slid on there surprisingly easily. And now I'm not actually going to fit everything together. I'm actually going to test the windows and fit them correctly just in case there's something wrong. And then finally I'm going to put all the trim back on. But I'm just going to put one screw in here, just to keep it in place. I've now connected the battery, turned the ignition to the first position, and I'm just going to motor the window up and down a couple of times, check that there's no noises. It talks about in the service manual motoring it down and then holding it down a second time on each of the stops, just so it knows where the end points are, and then you can start the aligning of the window afterwards. And that all seems pretty good. Alignment of the window is done with the roof on and the door closed, and obviously the window is going to slot all the way up into the seal. The books talk about using 2 pieces of masking tape on the front edge here at the top there. It needs to protrude in 3mm, so I put my piece of masking tape 3mm down. At the one at the back here, you look for the join in the roof seal, go 50mm rearwards of that, and then it needs to protrude 5mm. Where I put it initially, the front one actually looks alright, and the rear one needs to be adjusted. And the way I'm going to do that is, because it's hard to move the window with it in place like this, I'm going to open it, loosen off the seals, lift it the amount that I think is right, and then close it again and see if everything's okay. So that tool that we looked at before is this one here, that I'm going to slightly put that down in there, and I can loosen that seal off. Let's see if that lifts just like that. There we go. Maybe just a smidge more. And that looks pretty good. And once you have the windows adjusted, you can put all the trim back on, including all the screws. And the last thing is the outside door trim for that seal. And the way to do that, there's a bit of a tight fit, is to put it in place, and then we're going to slide it so this piece here goes underneath that front section there. There we go. All is good.